If you're ever driving down Route 106 in Michigan and spot a sign for the Greenbrier Motel, do yourself a favor and keep driving. There's something deeply wrong with that place, and I wouldn't wish its horrors on anyone. I began working at the Greenbrier Motel a week ago. It wasn't my dream job, night shift at the front desk, checking people in and out and doing inventory in the back. But I enjoyed the peace and quiet. As a rundown motel on an isolated highway, it gave me plenty of time to read and play computer games. Plus, the owner, Frank, didn't seem to care that I was a high school dropout with a record. From the very first day, though, I sensed something was off. For starters, there was the smell. When the wind shifted, the entire parking lot reeked of rotting meat. Closing the windows didn't help. The stench seeped in through the HVAC system. Surrounded by deep woods, I figured we were near some animals' kill grounds, or it was the roadkill of deer and possums on the highway. Either way, it was unsettling. Then there were the guest rooms. Some didn't have windows, and it seemed intentional. I could see the outlines where windows had once been. When I asked Frank, he said some guests preferred windowless rooms. He didn't elaborate, and I was too scared to press further. Things turned from strange to creepy once Frank left. As I settled at my desk, a woman in her 40s with black hair and pale skin walked in and locked the door behind her. "Frank left, right?" she asked. I nodded. "Who are you?" She introduced herself as Matilda, a longtime employee who cleaned the rooms. After some small talk, she leaned in and lowered her voice. "I want to make sure you're safe here," she said, glancing nervously at the door. "So listen to me. Don't ask questions. Just check people in, check them out, and mind your own business. Then you'll be fine." My heart sank. Okay. What if the police come? Will I get in trouble too?" She gave me a blank stare. "The police? Don't worry about them. Just don't ask questions and don't make eye contact for too long." I nodded, understanding that they didn't want witnesses. "Got it." That night, I checked in 3 people. A big guy in sunglasses who looked like he'd stepped out of The Godfather, a woman dolled up with makeup, and a skinny young guy in a hoodie that smelled odd. Following Matilda's advice, I didn't ask questions. Even when hoodie guy handed me a fake ID, I kept repeating to myself, "Don't ask questions and you'll be fine," and kept my eyes on the computer screen. At midnight, I assumed the rest of the night would be quiet. I started playing Minesweeper and listened to music on my phone. But at 2 a.m., my peace was shattered when the door swung open. The guy in sunglasses from earlier walked in. I cursed myself for not locking the door. I swallowed hard, my eyes glued to the computer screen as he approached. "Can I help you?" I asked, watching him from the corner of my eye. "Do you have any razors for purchase?" he asked. Razors? At 2 a.m.? An image of him slashing someone in his room flashed through my mind, blood everywhere, soaking into the carpet. No, we don't have any razors," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and my eyes on the screen. "Can you just check in the back, please?" he pressed. I didn't want to go check. Turning my back on him felt dangerous. He could pull out a gun, tackle me, or take me hostage, but refusing might anger him even more. I stared at Minesweeper on the screen, weighing my options, watching him out of the corner of my eye. That's when I noticed something strange. His sunglasses seemed to sit too low on his face, like his eyes weren't in the right place. And above the frames, there were no eyebrows or brow ridges, just smooth, flat skin. "Can you check in the back, please?" he repeated, his tone now annoyed. "Yes, sure." I sprang from my seat and ducked into the storage area, quickly glancing over my shoulder to make sure he wasn't following. He wasn't. Part of me wanted to stay hidden in the back, but his voice called out again, angry and impatient. "Did you find them?" Luckily, I found a few packaged razors among the toiletries. I grabbed them and handed them over, keeping my eyes on the floor. "Thank you," he said, sounding satisfied. He turned and left. As soon as the door shut, I locked it and closed the blinds. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't shake the image of his strange, smooth face. And then it hit me. All 3 guests I'd checked in that night had something covering their faces. The Godfather guy with his sunglasses, the woman with heavy makeup that cracked around her eyes and lips, and the hoodie guy with his hood pulled tightly over his head. They were all hiding something. Morning couldn't come soon enough. When the day shift workers arrived, I left in a hurry, drove home and slept, plagued by nightmares of faceless people and spidery eyelashes. When night number 2 rolled around, I reluctantly returned to the motel. Thankfully, it was quieter. Despite the glowing vacancy sign, no one checked in during my shift. I locked the door, settled down with a cup of coffee, and tried to enjoy some reading. But around midnight, a loud slam from outside interrupted the silence. I ran to the window and saw the door to room 16 wide open. The parking lot and sidewalk were empty, and the room was dark. I checked the computer. No one had booked that room for the night. Should I go out and close the door? I hesitated. It was late, and there was no one around. If someone was in that room and attacked me, no one would hear me scream. So I stayed inside, locked the door, and pulled up the security camera feed. Rewinding the footage, I saw the door open and a woman with long, dark hair step out. She disappeared into room 22. I checked the computer. Room 22 was booked to a woman named Cassandra Johnson. It looked like Cassandra might be sneaking into vacant rooms, possibly stealing things. Matilda must have forgotten to lock up after cleaning. I sighed, opened the door, and walked towards the open room. I considered knocking on room 22 but decided against it. Remembering Matilda's advice, I kept my nose out of other people's business. I locked up room 16 and headed back to the lobby, trying to be a good employee. As I walked towards the open room, a horrible smell hit me, like something rotting. My stomach churned. What did Cassandra do in there? Did she throw up or leave garbage? I reached into the darkness and flicked on the light. The room looked normal. The bed was made and the carpet was clean, but the smell grew stronger. Pinching my nose, I glanced around, feeling nauseous. Then I saw it. Something tan and folded was poking out from the other side of the bed. What is that? It looked like a beige sheet or pillowcase, but our sheets were white. Heart pounding, I stepped into the room. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. The smell worsened as I approached the bed. Fighting the urge to vomit, I peered over the side and froze. There was a pile of beige, slightly translucent material folded over itself. I instantly recognized familiar shapes, like 5 fingers. It looked like a glove made of skin, as if someone had shed their skin. I stepped back, legs shaking. It can't be. I backed away, my throat dry. This didn't make sense, not even as a murder scene. There was no blood. It was like a snake skin, clean and perfect, holding its shape like a ghost. I ran out of the room and saw the woman from room 22 walking towards me down the sidewalk. Strands of her dark hair hung over her face, but I could tell something was wrong with her features. Her eyes and lips were slightly out of place. She walked towards me, fast, her shoes clicking on the pavement. I didn't want to find out what she'd do if she caught me. I whipped around and ran as fast as I could, hearing her heels clacking behind me. She was faster than I thought possible in those shoes. I pushed myself harder until I reached the lobby, locked the door, and collapsed in the back room. Then the whistling started. Just outside the door, I could hear her, whistling. The sound moved as she circled the lobby, looking for a way in. I heard it at the door, then at the back, then the side windows, then back at the front. This went on for an hour. Finally, the whistling faded. I didn't move. I huddled in the back storage room until dawn broke. As soon as the day shift arrived, I got out of there fast. I wanted to quit. With everything happening, I wanted to walk away. But I needed the money. Finding a job with a rap sheet was tough. It was either go back to work or face eviction. So I went back. When I got on shift, I pulled Matilda aside and told her what I'd seen. I asked if my life was in danger, if other people were in danger. "I promise you, as long as you mind your own business, you'll be safe," she assured me. So I kept my head down. For the next few days, nothing happened. Sure, a few guests wore hats, sunglasses, or heavy makeup, but I avoided eye contact and minded my own business. Then came that one night in November. It was raining heavily and thunder shook the windows. I wasn't expecting anyone to check in. Hardly any cars were on the highway. But then I heard a knock. When I looked up, a man in a hoodie was staring through the window. A chill ran down my spine. He banged on the window, seemingly in a hurry. I grabbed the mace I kept under the counter and slipped it into my pocket before approaching the window. "Do you have any vacancies?" he asked in a low voice. I could barely hear him over the pounding rain. The vacancy sign glowed brightly behind him. He couldn't have missed it. "Yeah, come on in," I said, unlocking the door with one hand while gripping the mace in my pocket with the other. He stepped inside, rain dripping off his jacket onto the floor. I barely glanced at him and headed back around the counter, sitting down at the computer, keeping my eyes on the screen. In my peripheral vision, I saw him leaning over the counter, his face only a foot away from mine. I could smell the stale mothball odor coming off his clothes and hear drops of water plopping onto the counter from his sleeve. "Can you go faster?" he asked, his voice raspy. "Sorry, sir. I'm going as fast as I can," I replied, my heart pounding. "It's an old computer." My fingers slipped on the mouse as I rushed to click the buttons. "I don't have all day," he growled, leaning even closer. I wanted to look at him, but I forced myself to stare at the screen. Whatever was going on here, I didn't want to be a witness. "Your name?" I asked. As soon as the words came out, I froze. I needed a name to book the room, but maybe I wasn't supposed to ask. "Thankfully," he replied after a moment of hesitation, "Daniel Jones." The name struck me as fake, but I typed it into the system and completed the booking. He paid in cash, which made me uneasy, but I tried not to worry. I turned my back, took a key off the hook, and handed it to him. "Room 7, I said. He thanked me and waited by the door. After a minute, I asked, "Do you need something? Can you escort me to my room?" Oh, hell no. There was no way I could go out there in the middle of the night with this creepy guy. My mind raced with horrific scenarios. Shove me into the hotel room, kill me, hide my body in the trunk, and dump it in the woods. Or worse, maybe my skin would end up crumpled on the floor of one of the rooms. The longer I looked at him from the corner of my eye, the more unsettling details I noticed. Smears of dirt on his sleeves and pants, like he'd been digging a grave. His face was sunken, gaunt, with gray stubble and yellowish teeth. "Can't you just go yourself? I have something I need to do here. My boss will be pissed." "You can take 2 minutes to walk me to my room, damn it." His furious tone stunned me. My heart pounded. "Okay," I said finally. Clutching the mace in my pocket, I joined him by the door. "I'll walk you to your room." He didn't thank me. He just swung the door open, nearly hitting me in the face. I stepped out into the pouring rain with him, the parking lot like a lake. Our feet sloshed through the water, and I shivered as the cold seeped through my sneakers. I followed the man to his car, keeping a good 15 feet away. He popped the trunk, and I held my breath. Thankfully, there was only a duffel bag inside. He hoisted it onto his shoulder and headed for room 7. I followed at a distance, watching him fidget with the key. "You got a lot of other people staying here right now?" he asked as he slid the key into the lock. Some, I replied. Not great weather for it, he said. Not really. The storm's supposed to clear tomorrow. It'll be good weather then. Wow, this is taking a while, I thought to myself. That's when I noticed his hands. He wasn't really trying to get into his room. He was just inserting the key, pausing, and then pulling it out, over and over again. He was stalling for time. He was keeping me here on purpose. I looked up from his hands just in time to see him staring at me. His blue eyes were intense, studying me. Every inch of me screamed to run away, but he was 6 inches taller and thin. He'd catch me in seconds. I slipped my hand into my pocket, curling my fingers around the mace. Do you need help getting into your room? I asked. He shook his head. I'm going to go back to the front desk, I said, taking a step back. As soon as I said that, he froze. His eyes widened, his lips stretching into a grimace that showed his yellowed teeth. Don't go, he growled, his voice barely audible above the rain. Stay exactly where you are. I leapt into action. I whipped the mace out of my pocket and pointed it right at him. Don't get any closer. My finger hovered over the trigger, and then I heard it. Someone was whistling. Behind me, somewhere in the rain. The eerie tune cut through the raindrops like a knife. It was the same unsettling whistle I'd heard a few days ago. I'm sorry, the man said quietly, his blue eyes locked on mine. But I needed bait. I stared at him, my brain struggling to process what he was saying. Bait? I took a stumbling step back. The whistling grew louder. I whipped around. Through the rain, I saw someone walking through the parking lot, barely lit by the flickering street lamp. The mace fell from my hands and clattered to the ground. Then I turned and ran as fast as I could towards the lobby. The whistling stopped, replaced by loud, splashing footsteps, growing louder with every second behind me. I swung the door open, slammed it shut, and turned the lock. I pulled the blinds down over the window. Panting, I opened them with my fingers and peered out into the night. There was a woman standing in the parking lot, the same woman I had seen a week ago. Her hair and clothes were drenched with rain, but she was smiling, a big, crooked grin that sent chills down my spine. Her eyes were strange, wide and wild, incredibly light blue. In the darkness, it almost looked like she didn't have irises at all, just 2 pinholes for pupils, staring right at my door. She took a step forward. I ran over to my desk, grabbed my cell phone, and started dialing 911. Come on, operator. I'm at the Greenbrier Motel, and there's this guy, and this weird woman. A loud thump cut me off. I ran to the window and looked out. The man who'd booked room 7 was running toward the woman, holding something up in the air. A short dagger, shining silver in the rain. He's attacking her, I screamed into the phone. The woman's face changed, her features twisted, her grin creeping up to her eyes. Her arms cracked and stretched. She blinked, and her eyes turned pure white. Her body twisted unnaturally at the waist, so she faced the man. With fast, jolted movements, she leapt at him. Within seconds, he was dead. She stood on all fours above him, her knees bent the wrong way, her fingers far too long. With another horrible crackling sound, her neck stretched out 2 feet long, twisting like a snake. Then she looked at me. I leapt away from the window with a scream. I opened my mouth to speak, but only a squeaking sound came out. By the time I made it back to the window, the woman was standing there looking down at her kill. She looked normal again. Then she stepped over his body and walked towards the rooms. To my horror, she pulled out a key and opened room 22. Then she disappeared inside. The police arrived a few minutes later. I begged them to check room 22, saying something horrible was inside. But when they knocked on the door, a completely normal-looking woman opened it. I watched from the lobby. I couldn't hear their conversation over the pouring rain, but they weren't arresting her. They seemed to just be having a friendly chat, asking her what she'd seen. Then they thanked her and came back to me. "We'll need to see the security tapes from tonight, please," one officer said. But when I showed them the tapes, they got quiet. One of the officers made a call, mentioning something about an infestation. The other two officers ushered me into the lobby, their faces serious. They told me not to leave as they talked among themselves in hushed voices in the corner of the room. Then they approached. "You didn't see anything tonight," one officer said, leaning in close. "You got that? But what about—" "Listen to me very carefully," he interrupted, lowering his voice. "You didn't see anything, just like you never shoplifted in your life." "What? You understand me?" he asked. The silence stretched out between us. "Yeah, I got it," I said, my voice wavering. "I didn't see anything. I left the motel that night and never went back. I planned to never speak of what I saw, to keep my mouth shut just like they told me to. But after many sleepless nights, I realized I need to warn people. I need to warn you. I can't let another person die because of these things, whatever they are. So I'm begging you, if you're driving through Michigan and see that there's a vacancy at the Greenbrier Motel, keep driving. Don't stop.